Aero bikes can't climb, apparently. But is that a fact, or is that just an enduring opinion based on the way that they've always been marketed? Or is it in fact due to the reason that pro cyclists haven't seemed to have adopted them wholesale yet, and we always look to see what the pros do? Now, whichever it is, it does seem that if you're in the position of buying a beautiful new road bike, that your decisions are based on the following logic. If you ever ride up hills, you should buy the lightest bike that you can. And if you don't, you might be able to get away with an aero bike. But you see, increasingly, people are starting to think that that is total rubbish. And I am inclined to agree. I just wonder whether an aero road bike is almost always the fastest option. If you've come here expecting your usual GCN does science, then you might be left wanting, because actually the debate here is so finely balanced that there wouldn't really be any point in pitting two bikes head to head up a climb, because we wouldn't get any meaningful results. The difference is simply that small. Now, you will also have noticed, I'm sure, that in order to illustrate my points about aero bikes, I have been lent this incredible new Cannondale SystemSix. I've got a full video on it over on the tech channel, but in essence, Cannondale set themselves the goal of creating the fastest race bike out there. And they feel that they've hit their mark, and they've got the data to back it up. Data which happily helps to prove my point as well. Although before you say, well, of course, they want you to say that their new aero bike is faster everywhere, I would actually like to point out that they also have the SystemSix Evo in their lineup, which is actually one of the lightest bikes out there as well, so probably they don't really care what the conclusion is. Now, in terms of this bike, and compared to the SystemSix Evo, there is about 400 grams extra weight in the frame set. And that's simply because in order to create these large and aerodynamic tubes, you actually need more material. And then the same is also true of some of the aerodynamic components like the seat post and the handlebars and the stem. And then because it's disc specific, then you also have to add in a couple of 100 grams for those as well. But all in, it's probably about 1 kilo heavier than a UCI legal lightweight race bike. 1 kilo. That is it. So what difference is it going to make? Well, the first point to note is that aerodynamics do play a role even at slower speeds. In fact, on a flat road, at any speed faster than 15 kilometers per hour, wind resistance is the biggest force holding you back. As you start to climb though, and as the gradient steepens, more and more of your power output goes into overcoming the effect of gravity. And the only way to reduce that power needed is to reduce your mass. So you can see then that at some point a 1 kilo weight penalty is going to become more important. And what that point is though depends on the weight of the rider and also the rider's power output. But for example, a 75 kilo rider, so that's like 165 pounds, me effectively, after a big dinner, putting out 300 watts, the tipping point between aero and lightweight comes at 6%. So on any gradient shallower than that, an aero bike will go faster. And then on gradient steeper, a lightweight bike will have more of an advantage. Now, if you put out more power, then that tipping point goes at steeper gradients, perhaps up to 7%. And whereas a weaker rider will go faster on shallower gradients on a lighter weight bike. How much faster? Well, let's take a case study from Cannondale themselves. Alpe d'Huez, 13 kilometers at 9%. Rigoberto Urán, 62 kilos, riding at 350 watts, would be 10 seconds faster on his super light bike. Just 10 seconds. Our regular 75 kilo rider, just 19 seconds. Now, of course, if you don't race, you don't need to be governed by the UCI rules. And so with the necessary funds, you could therefore ride an even lighter bike, a bike that would therefore be more effective at climbing at shallower gradients. Except that it's not quite that simple, because in Cannondale's model, their lightweight and their aero bikes share the same deep section aero wheels. Wheels that you would need to sacrifice in order to get your mega lightweight bike, meaning that it would incur a greater aerodynamic penalty and therefore offset any benefits of that weight loss. Crikey. In essence then, can aero bikes climb? Well, yes, up to a point, but there is a much much bigger picture here. It may be that you do only spend your time riding up super steep climbs or down mega technical descents. And if that is the case, then you might as well flick over and watch the GCN show or something. But for the rest of us, what about all that time that we spend riding in between going up steep climbs? Well, on those bits, the difference between bikes is absolutely staggering. On this descent, which is 5%, holding 60k an hour on this SystemSix requires about 200 watts. Now, were I to swap on to a standard lightweight bike, I would require an additional 109 watts apparently. Now that's the difference between riding tempo and potentially riding down the hill even harder than I rode up it. And on the flat, if you're trying to hold off a peloton, or on the flip side, bring back a breakaway, you'd save 50 watts at 50 kilometers per hour. Even at cruising speed of 30k an hour, there is still a 10% saving. So when you look at this in the context of the whole ride or the whole race, yeah, you might lose a second or two on the climbs, but you might save 30 seconds in just the final 10 kilometers. Now, if the gains are actually that big, it seems like a fair question to ask then about why it's taken us so long to wake up to this, and in fact why so many pro cyclists still seem to be asleep. And I think one of the answers is probably down to the fact that the early aero bikes maybe just weren't all that good. I mean, aerodynamic, yes, but in order to get there, they had to make a lot of sacrifices. Sacrifices to the ride quality, so having a thin front end means a flexier bike, which means that it maybe doesn't go downhill quite as well or around corners. Problems exacerbated by the fact that perhaps integrated brakes maybe just don't work all that well. And then when you couple in the fact that there is a little bit of a weight penalty, and so it is slower on steeper climbs, you can kind of see why it ends up being a little bit niche. But now though, with the latest generation of aero road bikes, well, they're actually road bikes that are just mega aero. I mean, for a start, the latest generation have got disc brakes, which means that you can actually stop. But then it also means that you can engineer a bike from the ground up to become more aerodynamic as well. So in this case, we've got more aerodynamic fork because of it. We've also got more aerodynamic wheels that have been optimized for wider tires. And it's an optimization that can only be possible down to the fact that it has disc brakes, because the rim width is a whopping 32 millimeters wide. And because the carbon expertise is also continuing to move forward, although of course there is still that weight penalty with the Aero road frame, there is no sacrifice in ride quality. So, should your next bike be an aero bike? Well, obviously that depends entirely on you, but I definitely think that it is worthy of consideration. Now, let us know in the comments section, have you already got an aero road bike? What do you think? Or indeed, if you haven't got an aero road bike, what is putting you off from making that purchase? Make sure you get involved in the comments section down below. And as I mentioned right at the beginning of the show, then we also have a first look at that Cannondale SystemSix over on the GCN Tech channel. So if you want to see that, click just there.